After enduring a long cold winter and a recent 8 inches of snow at my house, I was ready to go wheels up and get to a warmer climate to do some birding. So in this video, we're going down to southern Arizona. My base of operations for the week was in Green Valley, Arizona at my parents' winter retreat, and my dad had recently seen some pretty good activity just there in the neighborhood, so we went by golf cart to go check it out. I suppose it's fitting that the first species I saw down in Arizona was the iconic northern cardinal. And another familiar bird of the Southwest followed shortly thereafter. As we were admiring the birds, a neighbor walked by and advised us not to go down to the wash that was nearby because he had just seen a bobcat. So, of course, we immediately went to the wash to try to find this bobcat, but we didn't get quite what we were expecting. The javelina is actually a type of wild pig that can be found pretty commonly in southern Arizona. They can tend to be a little bit territorial, so we decided to keep our distance from this one. Desert Meadow Park in Green Valley is sort of this hidden gem of a park. It's very community run and is almost like a small botanic gardens, but it has tons of great bird activity, finches, sparrows, and a great hummingbird garden. We then traveled down the road to historic Canoa Ranch, where the resident great egret and great blue heron both made for some nice shots in this sunset light. The next morning, we ended up going to Saguaro National Park on the west side, and this actually ended up being kind of a bust of a location. We stopped at the visitor center and talked to one of the rangers there, and when we mentioned that we were interested in doing birding, she kind of was like, yeah, well, it's only kind of good in the mornings and then towards dusk at sunset, but, have a look around. And so we did, and I sort of had in my mind that we would be seeing cactus wrens everywhere, and Gila woodpeckers would be coming out of all the cavities of the saguaros, and yeah, it just really ended up being kind of a bust. We then went to a burrowing owl community that was set up near the small town of Marana, Arizona. And unfortunately, as you can see in the video clips, the sun was just beating down on us. There was no cloud cover that day, and we were getting tons of heat distortion, which was making getting photos almost impossible, and even the video here is really, really wavy. By the end of it, I somehow was able to get one single photo that was pretty sharp, but burrowing owls continue to be my bad luck nemesis species. Oh boy, what can you do? Our third stop of the day took us to Sweetwater Wetlands Park just outside Tucson. The first thing I spotted here was this lesser goldfinch in its tiny little nest. But then we were also able to see a decent amount of waterfowl. This park was really beautiful. We did a lap around the trails that go around the outer perimeter of the ponds there. We were able to see some Gambel's quail. We did get a look at a vermilion flycatcher, although it didn't make for any good photos. But then we saw this Cooper's hawk perched in a tree right by the exit. On the third morning, my dad and I ventured a little bit south to the small town of Tubac, where we were going to attend the annual Hawk Watch that the city holds every March. The main event of this festival is to watch common black hawks continue their migration north. The hawks will stop for the night in the park in Tubac, and then the next day when it gets sunny, they will emerge from the trees and fly over town as they continue their migration north. It sounded really great, and my dad and I both pictured a great photo opportunity as the hawks emerged from the trees in the morning. They would do a nice swoop over the park and then continue their migration north. But that's not really the way this works. What actually happens is the hawks do emerge from the trees in the morning. They wait for the sun to come out and they wait for it to get warm, because what they do is they ride the thermals high up into the atmosphere, which gives them the most efficient way to continue their migration to the north. And as you can imagine, and as you can see from the video clips here, it's not really a photograph-worthy experience.
Way up there.
And despite the festival not being the best photographic opportunity, it was still awesome to be at. It's great being surrounded by a bunch of other birders who are all on watch looking for the Blackhawks. Gray hawks were also seen, zone-tailed hawks, and we even had a golden eagle.
Gray hawk.
All right, we are here at the Hawk Watch in Tubac, and as you can see, I'm a new company man. I just bought some new binoculars, and you can tell which brand. Yeah, I got a nice discount here, and again, thinking about getting a nicer set for Costa Rica later. But yeah, this is a cool little festival here. Ah, yes, this part. Well, I did have a little bit of an ulterior motive to coming to this festival. I knew that all of the major binocular brands were going to be there demoing, and I took that as an opportunity to shop for some new binoculars for myself, and I guess you can probably tell from this still what I went with, but I'll go into more detail about this at the end of the video. We then headed off to our next destination, which was going to be a bit of a flyer, as neither of us had ever been there and didn't really know a ton about it. We were going to Patagonia Lake State Park, and this place did not disappoint. After arriving, we first went to the feeders there, which had a nice variety of sparrows and finches. But the real star of the show at this location is their birding trail, which takes you down closer to the lake, and you get to walk back in these really cool mesquite thickets. Our last stop of the day was the infamous Patton Center for Hummingbirds in the city of Patagonia, and as we walked around back, the backyard feeders seemed to be the most active with, well, hummingbirds. We hung around here for about an hour, and as we were leaving, a bunch of northern cardinals showed up, both male and female. Day 4 was underway, and this was all about Madera Canyon, and here we stopped at the Proctor Falls parking lot to go down by the creek and see if we could find some bird activity down there. The falls were really pretty, but there wasn't a lot of bird activity going on. I was able to manage to see this canyon towhee back in the parking lot though. And then we made our way up to Santa Rita Lodge to look at the feeders, and one of my favorite things, of course, is watching the hummingbirds whoosh in and out. Right by your ear, you can hear them, and it's funny watching them all battle it out around the feeders. Other than the hummingbirds, we did see the usual fare at the feeders, like this wild turkey. There were a bunch of finches, and this bridled titmouse was causing a ruckus in the bath. I then caught eye of a species I don't believe I'd ever seen before. It was this striking yellow-eyed junco, which made for great photographs. And as you can see on this range map, the only place in the United States that you could even see this junco is down here in southern Arizona. I think I may have a new favorite species. before we go on to the next section, I thought I would share a Southern Arizona top tip with you. You will inevitably see a large group of birds circling high above, and they will look like hawks or a great raptor, and you will want to point your camera to the sky. However, you will come to realize that 95% of the time, it's one of these guys. Yep, the turkey vulture is very prominent and fooled me many times on this trip. On the last full day of my trip, we made our first stop this morning at what I would say was the biggest surprise stop of the entire trip. This was Agua Caliente Park in eastern Tucson. As we walked around, we noticed the charring on the trunks of these palm trees, which was actually caused by a fire started by a lightning strike a few years ago. Fortunately, these trees are very resilient, and despite the charring on the trunks, they're still healthy and growing. And when I say this park was the surprise stop of the trip, I mean it in the sense that not only was there great bird activity, but the park was immaculately kept and it was beautiful. Birding-wise, the first thing that caught our attention was this great egret sitting on a nice perch overlooking the lake. But then something else caught my attention as well, and I couldn't help myself but to try to make some fun photos here. We continued to walk around and heard a racket coming from another tree and decided to investigate. And it was this great-tailed grackle making all that noise. We then made our way down to this mesquite forested area where a bunch of other birders were looking for a Lucy's warbler. We were able to hear the warbler, but we never saw it. And my dad did get this shot of this verdin. My dad hung back looking for the warbler, and I continued on to the secondary ponds of the park. And you'll never guess who came flying in. Yep, it's our great egret friend from the main pond. I watched the egret stare intently into the pond, which I know means it's on the hunt. I was able to walk around to the other side of the pond and get a good perspective, and was able to roll this video. And, well, you guys know how I feel about snakes.
Nope.
As we walked back to the car, we were still keeping our eye out for the Lucy's warbler, and I did see a small bird make some movement really far back in the trees. It wasn't the warbler, but it was this rare rufous-crowned sparrow that I was able to just get a shot of in between two branches. For the last stop of my trip, we decided to head up to Mount Lemmon. It being mid-March, we didn't expect the bird activity to be too high, but neither of us had been up there before, so we decided any bird activity we did see would just be kind of an added bonus. And when we stopped here at Cypress Creek, I was able to find my new best friends again. We finally reached the top in this little town called Summerhaven, where we had a late lunch, and then we walked around town looking for any bird activity. We found only one active feeder, and I suppose it's fitting that the last image I took on this trip is of another yellow-eyed junco. All right, well, that was the Arizona trip. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Obviously, you can see we got around to a whole bunch of different places that week that I was there. And yeah, I think saw some pretty good stuff. Then those yellow-eyed juncos, I don't know what it is about them that I just really, really enjoyed photographing them. And I think it's their yellow eyes just stand out, and they've got really pretty colors. And man, if you just get them in the right light, they just make some really, really nice photos. So yeah, the yellow-eyed junco. Sorry, the mountain bluebird was my favorite species, but that only lasted like a week. It's already been dethroned, the yellow-eyed junco. So yeah, just wanted to jump in here at the end and kind of go over a few things in the video and a few things that didn't make it in the video. I had a failed barn owl chase in there that obviously didn't include. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about, first off, the binoculars and the whole Zeiss thing, and yeah. so what had happened was, so we were at that hawk festival in Tubac, and all of the big binocular like manufacturers were there with binoculars and scopes, and you could just demo them, and it was great. And I have been in the market for a new set of binoculars because mostly I want to have a nice pair for my upcoming Costa Rica trip. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to go and demo a few. And of course, I'd done a bunch of research leading up to this about what I thought I wanted, but it was cool to try them out. And it came down between Swarovski and Zeiss. They were both there. And so I went to each tent and demoed both pairs. And I liked both equally. The Swarovskis were really nice, but man, they're expensive. And it's not that the ones that I got were cheap either, but I ended up going with the Zeiss. I will put it up here. I haven't actually received them yet. They're still shipping to me. But I went with the Zeiss SFL 10x40s. And my current binoculars are these. These are Celestron Nature DX 8x42s. And they're perfectly great binoculars. They are a very good, probably one of the best rated like budget binoculars. So if you are looking for binoculars and you don't want to break the bank, or you're not ready to go like hardcore into this, they're great. I would highly recommend them. They are currently on Amazon, I think for like $115. I would say they are well worth it. But when you look in them compared to like a real nice pair, like what I ended up getting, it is just night and day difference. So I'm very excited to get my Zeiss SFL 10x40s. And when I bought them there, the guy was like, oh yeah, come back over to the tent after you pay. You get some free stuff. And I was like, sweet. So I went back over to the tent and I was like, all right, where's my free stuff? And he gave me that Zeiss hat. And I was like, oh, I am a Zeiss ambassador now. I was like, I'm never taking this hat off. So anyways, that's where the Zeiss hat came from. And yeah, I got it because I bought a pair of binoculars. So that was that whole thing. Let's see here. I was just saying, I remember there was a funny thing that happened that I tried to think about how I could edit it into the video, but it just didn't make sense because the story itself is very bizarre. But it had to do when we were at the Patagonia Lake State Park. I mentioned in the video that it had this really great birding trail that you could go down, and you go back into all these like mesquite trees, and it's just very pretty back there. And I was down there, and my dad was a little bit behind me, and I had kind of gone ahead, and I ran into another couple that were out there birding. And, you know, we were just kind of making small talk, like, oh, what are you seeing, and where are you from? And I was like, okay, well, it's nice talking to you guys. And then I was going to head off. And the lady was like, oh, by the way, if you see a cowboy or you hear gunshots, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So she ends up telling me the story that apparently it happened just right before we got there. Is that this area where this lake is also by a bunch of like ranches and like farmers or ranchers and people who herd cattle. Like it's ranchers. And so I'm such a city boy. I just don't know what to tell you. But anyways, they share some of the land with where this lake is. And the cows, it's sort of like open range. So the cows can go and it's not unheard of to see a cow like grazing like on the birding trail. And so apparently what had happened was the ranchers that were nearby had lost track of a few cattle, and they tracked them all the way into where the birding trail was. And one of the cows had broken its leg. And so this rancher, like on a horse, like just blasted the cow like right there. And like I said, I did not see this happen. This happened like right before we got there. And so this lady was telling me this whole story about, yeah, if you see cowboys or you hear gunshots, it's probably just another cow they're putting down. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So then she finally explained out the story. Fortunately, I did not hear any more gunshots, and I didn't run into any ranchers or injured cattle. But that was a bizarre. Not expecting to run into that out on the birding trail at the local reservoir, but so it was. And then the failed barn owl search. So there was one morning where I was kind of on my own. My dad had a painting class that he didn't want to, skip just because I was there. So I said, it's fine. Go to your painting class. I will head out and do something solo for the morning. And so I was kind of just looking at eBird and just looking to see if there had been any interesting, sightings on there lately. And one that stood out to me was a pretty consistent reports of barn owls about 20 minutes away. And so I was like, well, I'd be a fool not to go try to find them. And what I was going to do was I was going to shoot this as its own like standalone YouTube video, separate from like the trip. So I did like the full production of me driving to this place and getting to the spot. And it was interesting because the spot was these abandoned mines that the owls were roosting in during the day. And I was like, ooh, abandoned mines? Like, this sounds a little dangerous. So I got to the spot, and it's up near Box Canyon. And it was not like I was thinking mines are like, caves in the mountain. Like I wasn't expecting that they were actually, in fact, holes in the ground. And so I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I found them, and I hiked. When I first got there, I was looking up the hill to see where the mine shafts were, and I noticed right away that there was like a pack of javelinas standing right by the mines, and I was like, well, that's not awesome. I was like, and again, I don't really know a ton about javelinas. I just know that they can be territorial, they can be very protective, so I wasn't going to go up there and just be like, scram, go on, get, I was like, yeah, I'll wait for them to kind of pass by. So I drove off and then came back like 20 minutes later, and they were gone. So I hiked up the hill and I found these abandoned mine shafts, and you could see all over the walls, it was just covered in whitewash. So the owls were definitely there recently, but they were not there that morning. And I was like, oh man, this would have been awesome. Maybe I will come back later, and because I really wanted to see these barn owls. And so my dad and I, that was the day. Then we went to Madera Canyon that afternoon, and then I was like, oh, we can't go home yet. We have to go back to these abandoned mines. And my dad is like, where are you taking me? And I'm like, you'll see. It's up this hill. And so we drove back to the spot, and I made him hike all the way up the hill, and the owls were not there again. So I was like, oh man. But I mean, you could easily see where they were though, because like I said, there was just owl shit everywhere. And so I was thinking like, well, maybe enough people have been up here recently that's kind of spooked them off this spot. So, it's kind of a bummer. And then, of course, yesterday, after I got home, I was pulling up reports on eBird just to look. And of course, the barn owls were reported in that same spot the very next day. So go figure, they're still there. They just weren't there the day that I went. So, but anyways, that was just some kind of funny stories from the trip. And overall, again, thanks everyone for tuning in and watching my videos. I really, really appreciate it. I've been getting some pretty good engagement lately. Like I love it that people are leaving comments on most of the videos now, and I love interacting with everyone who watches. And so again, I really, really appreciate it. So anyways, I will be back out this weekend. We've got baby owlets are coming around. We've got a bunch of other stuff that I'm trying to film for this big spring project. So, yeah, no rest. I've got to get right back out there and start getting some new stuff. So anyways, thanks again for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.